Your next challenge is entitled, How Much is True? You are to create a function which returns the number of true values there are in an Boolean array. Well, in an array, but we'll see it's a Boolean. Over down to the examples here. So we just get these. We're going to get some combination of true and false values, and you simply are to tell how many of them are true in each collection. Notice the empty array here is a possibility, which would naturally imply 0 true values. So, straightforward enough. On to the code. Pause, make your own. I'll start by doing the basic implementation, where I'm going to, kind of like we did with the sum accumulating, we created a variable to hold that value at any time. So I'll say true count 0, and I simply looped over the entire collection for each bool be in the array, and if b, increment the true count. If it's not b, the count won't get incremented, and you just go on to the next value and check that. By the time you're done, simply return true count. This would be the basic way. I think this will work. This is something we've been doing in other contexts. Yep, so we're happy. This is not how I would do this, but if some of the other ways of doing things feel a little too over your head or too advanced, that's fine. You can keep using these sort of solutions. That's perfectly acceptable for learning. Another way to do it, using some language features, would be to simply return the array, and I'm gonna use our friend link again. I'm going to return the array, and it has a method called count. Arrays are enumerable. They would implement this. So there's a count method that I found that I want to use for this. It'll do the same sort of thing, go over the collection and count based on the criteria that I give it. And you'll notice by itself, you just get the number of elements in the sequence, so almost like the length, it's just going to tell you how many are in there. We're more interested in, we have a condition, right? We don't care, we need to know more. If we only count the values that are true. So this version allows you to pass a function in, notice they call it a predicate. That's a fancy word for a function that returns a Boolean. It's a true or false. And so we're going to leverage this. We're going to pass in a function that essentially tells how to mark something as a hit or a miss. So this is a little bit new, so bear with me. You can pass functions as parameters into methods. So I'm going to do that. One more thing before we leave here. You notice this actually looks like it has 2 arguments, right? You get this big glob here, source, and then you get the function thing that we're going to use. Notice though that this first parameter is preceded by the this keyword. So I'm not going to go a lot into this at this time, but just know that this is an extension method where you're going to call this count method on an object of this type. So effectively something that matches this signature, and then you're going to pass the arguments that come after this first one. So it'll be only the predicate in our case. You can look up extension methods if you want to understand that some more. I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but that's how. It's a quick explanation for why I won't be passing in 2 items in this count method. So for mine, well, let's do it this way. I was going to go right into the lambda, but let's take a step there first. So it said we could pass a function, right? So let's make it just a dummy function. To sort of illustrate this. Parameter. So this is just going to be some kind of generic method. Doesn't really do anything. I'm just making a dummy method to show you how this works. Then this essentially just returns the Boolean value of whatever's passed in. So then I'm just going to take this name, it's a function, and pass it in here. And let's see, oh, you know what? For that, I don't want to submit the final yet. Let's refresh and get a clean slate. Okay, back to code. Replace that. So here we are back. Let's see what this gives us. Okay. Object references required. Oh, okay. So notice that we're getting an error on line 5. And if you didn't notice, this second number is 20. You could count in 20 spaces from here to figure out where exactly the real problem area starts. It's probably right here with this method name. But in case that helps you. First one is line number from the top going down, and the second one's from left to right going over from the left. So if that helps. And yeah, they want an object reference to use this method. I know we haven't gotten too much into classes yet, but you've probably noticed the static keyword laying around that we haven't addressed either, but that essentially removes the sort of object requirement. So we're going to do that here. We don't need an instance of the program class to invoke this method once I add this static here. Before I did, without the static, it required that you constructed an object of this type and used that to access this method. We're going to bypass that. It's not necessary, and I overlooked that. So let's try it again. We'll talk more about that as we use classes more. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's a lot better than writing out all of that loop yourself. Nice, short, very readable one-liner. Now there is another problem here. You know, this method here is not very useful. It's kind of a one-off thing we use to solve this problem, and let's say we're just not going to use it anymore. It's kind of overkill to make a whole method for that. So the language offers you something called Lambda Functions that are essentially functions, but you don't name them, and you don't have to write them out as a full proper function like this. You can sort of define them in place. And so I'm going to do that because that's better than this. And again, I'll refresh, get us a clean slate. Okay, place that. So now, yeah, let's blow this whole thing away. Just to clutters up our class, right? For something that's not very helpful. What I'm going to do now is just enter a variable name. I'm just going to use X. You could put dog there or anything you want. And so you could put X equals true. And you should get the same result. And this weird format here, let's go. I pulled up the Lambda Expression page from the documents, and this is a nice quick way of describing it. Basically, first you define your input parameters, then you use this arrow, and then you have your expression, basically the guts of your function. And so if you kind of take a step back and look at this, it looks a lot like defining a function, doesn't it? These parentheses, look at that. You know, you got a name, you got, oops, you got your parameters inside these parentheses, then you got these curly braces and put all your statements in there, right? It was a lot like that. Just the name's missing from the front. We don't use this. We don't have to use that weird arrow thing when we define a function, but then you would write the lines of your code too. So you can kind of see that, right? A no-name function with a little bit kind of concise form there. So that's all that is. And so yeah, this would work. In this case, x equals true is kind of redundant. You see people do that, like consider it this way, and let me show you how this looks silly. Imagine we had a Boolean truth equals true. And then if I'm doing an if check on this, right, I don't have to say, so I don't have to say if truth equals true, right? That's redundant. Whenever you can simply pass in the Boolean itself. So it's the same concept here. Like, I know this might be a little easier to understand. I wrote it out that way on purpose so you could kind of see some kind of expression there, but really it's redundant. So in this case, since we're dealing with Booleans, this should work just fine too. And we don't need this. My shortcut doesn't work there. We'll comment it. So really you don't need to say x equals true. And now this input parameter, right, we didn't even say what kind it is. And the kind, the type, integer, or I'm sorry, Boolean, scratch that, is derived from the array itself, right? This is a collection of Booleans. So it's smart enough to figure out, hey, x, or anything you want to put in there, b, sure. It's going to know that that's a Boolean and simply return whatever that value is. So let's check this. And isn't that nice? You don't have to write out that stupid function that we had before. Something, that this is useful when you would just never use it again. You're just making this one-time function just to solve the given problem at hand. If you were going to use something over and over again, by all means, make it into a proper function. But these lambdas are pretty slick. Nice, concise form for writing. That's pretty popular, so you will see that. Don't be scared when you see this arrow thing. Hopefully that's clear. You're not expected to know lambdas and extension methods at this point, but again, the concept is to introduce it. Maybe you only understand 5 or 10% this time. You hear someone else explain it, 10 other people explain it. Finally, it starts to sink. You start using it, it's going to get there. That's how it was for me. I didn't understand everything up front either. Just relax, have fun with it, and yeah, as usual, hit me up. Thanks for watching.